Hello, everyone. Welcome to Nurses Out Loud. Here's your host.
Welcome to Nurses Out Loud Talk Radio. I'm your host, Nurse Michele, on America Out Loud News. All of our lives have been changed so much since 2020, probably in ways that you do not even fully recognize because it's now become the new norm. The globalists, with their agenda to shut down the world with COVID-19, successfully propagandized the American public into a state of such fear that citizens all over this country were so afraid they actually believed the absurd recommendations that were to be followed. Anything from the 6-foot stickers everywhere, mask to enter buildings, mask just to play outside, enter playgrounds that are even covered with sand in California to keep kids from enjoying the fresh air outdoors. Actually, when you look back, you hopefully see the absurdity of it all. But there were people who were quite simply awake very quickly, and they saw the propaganda clearly for what it was. They saw the absurdity of the non-scientific recommendations, even though those recommendations were coming out of the presumptive expert scientists in our public health arena. Perhaps you were one of the people who were awake, or perhaps you were slow to waking up, but eventually you woke up slowly. And those who were awake, those who were motivated by justice, knew that something had to be done. And brave people all over this country and actually all over the world stood up against the majority and did what they believed they were called to do. All the callings were not the same. That tends to be how it goes with being called for a job, an endeavor, or a great work. And in 2020 and 2021, it required those brave enough to accept those callings. I met Dr. Robert Malone, who is accredited to mRNA technology. And while he and I were talking, he said to me once, Michele, the truth is there are thousands of you all over the world. You knew exactly what you were supposed to do, and you just simply did it. You did not have fear of man or anything. You just did what needed to be done. You did not need pay. You did not need a paycheck. You did not need orders. You just did what needed to be done. Today's guest is one of those brave people among us. And today you're going to hear about his journey and what it was like to be awake, to feel the burden of a call, to take action and simply do what needed to be done to resist tyrannical, illogical, absurd, unconstitutional mandates. But before I bring on my special guest today, who is Dr. Garrett Soldano, I'm going to let you all enjoy this video that tells you the brief story about how it all began for him. Stay with us.
Good afternoon, my fellow Michiganders. Good afternoon, my fellow Americans. Here we are today going to talk about, again, the governor. When she gives us lemons, we are going to make vats and vats and vats of lemonade, especially with the clown show that we are currently in, and we continue. I mean, we're shutting down all these businesses. We're ruining these people's lives. And I knew in my head at the time, I could just foresee what was going to happen. I knew that lockdowns, if you do it for a long period of time, do more harm than good. We're social beings. And I just had all this anger inside of me. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to make a Facebook group. And I did it for my own personal expression. I just wanted to get something off my chest. I just made like a 2 to 3 minute video, just like, why is this happening? This doesn't make sense. And I posted it. And that night, I go home to my wife, and there's like 500 people that joined our group. And I looked at it, I was like, holy cow. Like, there's 500 people that feel just like I do. And that's one of the things I think with conservatives, we thought we were alone. And when I woke up the next morning, it was 5,000. And I went to work that day, and later on that day, it was 100,000. And the second night, it was 200,000. The third night, it was 300,000 people. And I looked at my wife on a Sunday afternoon. I was like, you know, what the heck did I do? And then we got clipped overnight. Boom, Facebook took us down. The reason we got taken down was we basically got a notification, or I got a notification from Facebook that said I was advocating the spread of disease. And the post that they got me on was when I was doing a Facebook Live at Carl the Barber's at his facility when he was refusing to shut down. And I didn't interview anybody. All I did is held up my phone and I was like, hey, I'm at Carl the Barber's. We're in here. We have somebody that's standing up.
I'm not sure he even told me that he was starting the Facebook group, and it was just a way for him to express some of his grievances and kind of put it out there. Why is this happening? What's going on? This doesn't feel right. And I remember we were just about to fall asleep. He checked his phone, and we couldn't believe that it was thousands of people had already joined the group. And when we woke up, and the thousands more that had joined the group, he said, I'm not the only one. We are not the only ones who feel this way. I knew it. I believe I was the one to tell him to run for governor before he even made the decision. God's gift to Garrett was leadership. He stands up for the regular person who can't stand up for themselves.
We need a person like Garrett that is not a politician, that is willing to take off the gloves and fight.
He's done all this with zero expectation. If anything, there was more to lose. And that was a risk that he was willing to do to be a voice.
He's not just talking, he's out there in the community, he's out there advocating, he's out there, standing up for the people, and that's what we need.
My job's not done. My vow is not done. I have to finish what I promised the state of Michigan. I have to finish what I promised the people of the state of Michigan what I would do. And I won't quit. And I don't quit. I'm a fighter, and I will continue to push this thing forward until I fulfill my vow to the people. I'm Garrett Soldano, and I'm running for governor.
Power of one can lead to the power of many.
So thankful for leaders who showed up and spoke truth without fear. Their stories must be told. And that is what we're going to be doing today. Welcome, Dr. Soldano, for joining us here on this uncensored platform to get the stories of the people to the people. We're so thankful for you. And we're so thankful for your presence here and for what you have done. And we want your story to be out to the public. So first, I want to start with, just where you and your family found yourself. In 2020, all of us were just leading our lives. You are a doctor. So why don't you tell us a little bit about where your life was in 2020 when the pandemic hit?
Yeah, number one, that video always just brings up just an amazing amount of emotions. You tend to forget, but that triggers a lot of what all of us have been fighting for almost 5 years now. So it always brings back I'm in my gut right now trying to hold my feelings in check because it is very emotional to really reflect back on what we've been fighting for and how long of a fight it's been. And we're still fighting here in the state of Michigan. But I was like a lot of other Americans before the pandemic that never wanted anything to do with politics. What I did, just like most Americans, was I was asleep on the watch. I would go to my job and serve my patients, and I would come back and I was living the American dream and everything was great and hunky-dory. And then the narrative started to be pushed out all over corporate media with the video that, one thing of the video that came out of China and I always bring this up because so many people, Nurse Michele, they don't want to talk about it. The people who bought into this kind of psyop, this narrative, they don't want to talk about it. They just want to sweep it underneath the rug and forget about it. And I'm just one of those people that won't let it go because we have to learn from our mistakes and we have to make sure that it never happens again. So I always reflect back to that video that came out of China by the Daily Mail in February of 2020. And a lot of people don't remember this, but I like to always show it, is it was the folks that they had footage that were lying in the streets all dead. I mean, even there's a part in that video where they have somebody actually falling down in the street dead. And they had this scary music in the background. And that was pushed out 24/7 worldwide.
Yeah.
And it scared the hell out of people. I remember being at a neighborhood party when that thing was getting pushed out, and people were like deathly afraid, like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? I'm like, I don't like something in my gut, which a lot of your listeners probably can attest to, like something inside just was off. Something didn't make sense. And I was like, well, yeah, there's ways that we can protect ourselves. We don't have to run in fear. Even during the Spanish flu, you were told that it was going to be the end of humanity, but there were some brave doctors, even back in the early 1900s, that said, hey, don't fear the flu. Don't fear the flu. There's common sense things that we can do. And I guess being a chiropractor, I had that belief system on how powerful our bodies are and what God gave us, an immune system, fight against these things as long as we properly take care of it, put in the right nutrition and everything else. So I just had a kind of a different mindset. And then the lockdown started. And little by little, our whole country started to lock down. And our draconian Governor Gretchen Whitmer here in the state of Michigan, was one of the worst. She was telling us what we could and couldn't buy. We couldn't buy seeds in the grocery stores. We couldn't go on motorized boats, right? I mean, nothing made sense. And you're like, what the hell does going to buy seeds from my yard? I mean, she totally was like our nanny governor, our draconian governor. And I remember like, this is just wrong. Like, we shouldn't be doing this, but nobody was really talking about it. Like, I don't know if it was because of fear or anything else, but when she extended our state of emergency on April 9th, telling us that we were going to be locked down even longer, I just had enough. I remember I was in my office just furious. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to start a Facebook group. And I called it Michiganders Against Quarantine at the time. And I just did like a little hissy fit video, a 5-minute little rant, like this is wrong. There's better ways of doing this. You know, we shouldn't be handing in our constitutional freedoms, our sacred values, and our citizens' rights, regardless of a pandemic. And I posted it. And I went home that night, just like that video you just showed. And I went to my wife and I said, I started a Facebook group. And she's like, why? And I was like, well, I had to get something off my chest. And that night, 500 people joined. And I was like, holy cow. I mean, at that time, you know, I would do a video on social media about nutrition or chiropractic, and it would get like 50 views, you know, and I'd be like, this is great. I said, 500 people joined my group. There's literally 500 people that feel just like I do. And I went to bed that night. And the next night it was 100,000, then 200,000. And literally the third night it was at 300,000. And I looked at my wife and I said, what the hell did I do?
I know, it's an amazing story. And your story is, so many people have said stories like that they just had to get out there on social media. I mean, I literally had to have a kid help me set up an Instagram account to make sure I could just get out of my system what I knew I had to do. And and people still tell me, Michele, I was there when you just had 50 followers, which only lasted maybe a week. And then it just has exploded ever since until the censorship started. It's hard to fathom. I mean, I'm more than half of 100 years old. So it's hard to fathom that we're even saying that about American society, that even censorship exists. And here we are on an uncensored platform right now where alternative media has had to evolve because the message was we were all quite determined it was going to get out, and we had to find places we could do it because social media wasn't. So I'm sure you did even face eventually some censorship on that Facebook platform. So how long did you get? It grew substantially, but then how long before they came after you?
3 weeks. 3 weeks we grew to 400,000 people. We had people telling us like Homeland Security and the FBI were having daily morning meetings about our group, because when you have 400,000 people, I mean, you have a small army. And these people were engaged, they were activated, they were very frustrated, and they were very angry, rightfully so. You know, and that's what I always say is like everything that we stood up for, the unconstitutional lockdowns, the mandates, there's nutritional components that you can do. Everything that we've been standing up for has been proven 100% to be spot on right. And that's what they're trying to slowly just forget. And I won't let it go. I just can't, because there's no way I'm ever going to go through something like that again. But yeah, in 3 weeks, I did literally a video, one of our barbers here in the state of Michigan, Carl the barber, an older gentleman. He just was trying to stay open and cut people's hair to provide himself a living. That's how he put food on the table. And he's just like, I can't shut down or my family will starve. And so I went to his place in Owasso, Michigan, and all I did was a Facebook Live. And coincidentally, right behind me was CNN, Fox News, ABC, and NBC, because it was big time news at the time. And Carl the Barber eventually beat Governor Whitmer, just to let you know. And I did a Facebook Live and just say, hey, I'm at Carl the Barber's. He's standing up. Didn't talk to anyone, didn't do anything, just did a live informing the people what was going on. And then that night, boom, I was out. I got a message. I screenshot the message that I was advocating for the spread of disease for being outside during the lockdowns.
Oh, my word.
So just like that, gone. 400,000 people disconnected. We kind of knew that was a possibility. So we were reorganizing behind the scenes. Some other people started to get involved with our movement. And I co-founded an organization called Stand Up Michigan, which we started to build a website and start to do things behind the scene because we knew the inevitable was happening, because we start seeing conservatives and conservative movements being censored and taken down. And then right when we were taken down, we started to direct our movement over to the other platform called Stand Up Michigan. And that grew to like 100,000, I think. And that eventually got taken down 6 months later. But it's been a knockdown, drag out fist fight in the phone booth ever since here. That's for sure.
Well, I tell you what, I learned about Stand Up Michigan really early in the pandemic because I needed to be able to have credible citations for the mask mandates before we had Brownstone Institute publish the 170 studies showing the ineffectiveness and harms of masks. You had some Michiganders, Kristen Megan and her partner, whose name escapes me at the moment. Yeah, Debbie. Yeah, those two are powerhouses that have made sure that the science about that got out there, because people needed to understand that they assumed because they saw medical people with masks on sometimes when they were in the hospital, we all wore masks because we believe they kept you from getting bacteria and infections through masks, when they did not actually understand why we wore masks. So we were trying to educate them on that. And sadly, a lot of nurses and doctors are ignorant about who really are the experts on masks. And it is the OSHA experts. It's the industrial hygienists who are the ones who come in and say what can and cannot pass through certain fabrics. And they knew the truth, and y'all had them at Stand Up Michigan. So a lot of good things happened in Michigan because of some of you.
Well, it's the people, right? And that's what was kind of my primary role in all of this, and what it continues to be today is to inspire ordinary people to do extraordinary things, to say, hey, you have a voice, and you never know what small act that you may say or do that may literally change lives, millions of lives tomorrow. You just have to stand up and be willing to put yourself out there. And I know a lot of the listeners out there, it's scary. It's scary to put yourself out there because you're going to get attacked. Not everyone's going to love you, that's for sure. But when you're doing the right thing and you're following your gut on things and you're helping people, you can put your head down every single night knowing that you did what you could, and it literally can transpire into something wonderful.
Yeah, speaking truth without fear is a biblical concept for people that are Christians. They've heard that phrase before, but boy, did it come to light in 2020 that you had to actually say what needed to be said. For example, you said you kind of felt like you were alone, like who's out there that agrees with our sentiment, right? And they basically had us so isolated. You weren't taking walks in your neighborhood. You weren't getting out in the social world that you typically were in. So you weren't running into people in the streets. And now, I mean, to this day, my family, my kids will say to me, Mom, are you literally going to talk about this everywhere you go? I'm like, literally everywhere I go. So if you are unfortunate enough to be my checkout clerk, you are my captive audience until I am done with my groceries, because you need to be reminded what did happen. And I asked them questions. Was somebody making you wear that mask? Did they make you do that to keep this job? Do you know it's unconstitutional for you to be made to wear that? Did they threaten you? And I tried to empower them as much as I possibly could. And I'm amazed that to this day, here we are in 2025, and we still have people who do not know fully what all really has gone down. It's really the warriors on the front lines who are still out there trying to keep this subject alive, because here we are, it's 2025. They're already trying to play games with us again. And we'll get to that on the second half. But before we do that, I want to, first tell more about how this propelled you. So how did you and your crowd respond to 3 weeks later getting your Facebook page censored? And what did that look like?
Well, when we got disconnected, we immediately said, you know what? If they're going to push, we're going to push back even harder. And so you were supposed to be locked down at this time, right? You weren't allowed to be outside. There was a chance that you would get pulled over and the state police would say, hey, where are you going? You know, everything was taken away and stripped. I mean, we were living in tyranny in this very idea called America, which we never thought was even possible. And we had a governor here in the state of Michigan who was ruling unilaterally. She didn't have the legislative support. They were actually standing up against her, and she bypassed the legislature. Now think about that. She bypassed the very people who we, the people, put into office to represent us, and she was ruling unilaterally by signing this 1945 or utilizing this 1945 Emergency Powers Act. And so what we started to do right then is we started to hold like what we called freedom festivals. And the first one that we held, I think, was like a week after we got shut down, and it was in a small town in west side of Michigan called Newaygo. And when we decided to do that, I did a video and it went like super viral really quick, got taken down. But we put the call to action out there and said, hey, we're going to have a freedom festival. We're going to support these businesses who decide to go against what the governor's doing, and we're going to buy from them. And it's just going to be a great atmosphere, because they were taping off. I don't know how bad it was, because you guys are from California, right?
No, Georgia.
I love the South.
Yeah.
And they were taping off like playground equipment, like the yellow caution tape that was everywhere, right? And so we ripped all that shit down. Like we're going to have a freaking party. And we had a stage set up. The guy who helped me co-found Stand Up Michigan, his name is Ron. He had a business where they could make banners and stuff. So we made all these great banners of Stand Up Michigan, and I put out the video. And I remember driving up there with my wife when you're not supposed to be driving. And I said, you know, like, how many people are really going to show? Like 50, 60, thousands ended up coming.
Of course.
Thousands. And American flags were flying. I mean, you got to remember, it gives me the chills and it gets emotional even thinking about it, because at this time, people were locked down for 2 months. Yeah. They weren't seeing friends. They weren't communicating. They weren't hugging families. I mean, I remember in my neighborhood, I was like the black sheep of the neighborhood. Obviously, nobody talked to me, but my neighbors would talk, and their kids would talk across the street. And there was like me and a couple other neighbors are like, we're not doing that. We're going to be jogging and talking and living life as usual. And we were the threat of society, obviously, but thousands of people. And it was very emotional. People were crying. The kids were playing. I mean, you felt real again. You felt like Americans. You felt like you had dignity again.
I'm assuming this is May of 2020. After that 2-month lockdown, you're finally beginning to feel like we're getting out of our houses. But if I'm not, now in Georgia, our governor, you know, we were set free. And but it wasn't quite this. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't said to you that y'all were free in May. So y'all were going up against still oppressive mandates in May of 2020.
Oh yeah, you'd get in trouble. I mean, they were trying to arrest restaurant owners for being open. I mean, it was straight up communism here in Michigan, and I think California was another place that was really bad. New York with Cuomo, Clown Cuomo as we call him. But no, I mean, and when we start doing this, I mean, we start holding them, you know, every couple of weeks. And at that time, there was a group called Unlock Michigan who got some funding and said, you know what, let's go after that 1945 law that she's doing. So they started a citizens petition. And we spearheaded and helped spearhead that Unlock Michigan campaign, where we collected 539,000 signatures in 80 days to submit those signatures. Now, obviously, the judicial and that kind of legislative process takes time. It eventually got taken off the books. So we, the people, did that. Not Garrett, not anyone else. It was a collective effort of the people that hit back, rightfully so. And we got that horrible law off the books that no governor could ever do what she did to us again.
So let me ask you about that law. So 1945, that's around World War II is going down. What happened in Michigan in 1945 around that war? And what was that law allowing?
I would think that it was because the threat, if Nazi Germany or Japan would have been on our soil, that you would have unilateral decision-making at that time, that you didn't have the time to do the politics and the legislative stuff. I think that's why it was created, but it was an outdated law.
Yeah, and it had probably nothing to do with medical situations at all. She was extending it.
Great. Thank you for bringing this up, because as this started to transpire, now we're in the October of 2020, our state Supreme Court, which at the time, fortunately, leaned a little right with what was called common sense, actually overruled her. And she said every single executive order that she did from the pandemic was unconstitutional. And I remember I was deer hunting with my son, and that alert came on my phone that the Supreme Court, the state Supreme Court, ruled in favor of we the people. And I hit my son in the chest, and I was like, I'm sorry it's your first time hunting, but I got to go do a live because we just won, right? We're free. And he's like, okay. He got his deer the next day. I took him out. He got his deer the next day, but I wasn't father of the year that night. That's for sure.
No,
but
you were.
Yeah, thank you for my ego. But I did a live, and I was telling everyone, like, we won. Like, and it was emotional, and we were like, we did it. And I went out that night to the restaurants locally. I'm like, open your doors, no mask, nothing. It's over. We won. And you know what she did? She weaponized the health department.
Okay, so what month is this happening in? It's hunting season. So what month did this go
October 2020.
Okay, October 2020. We are about to be unleashing the vaccine just 2 months later in December. And she's starting to weaponize health immediately after that.
Immediately. She said, we're not open. This is a health emergency still. I don't care what the state support. I mean, she's totally ruling unilaterally like a dictator. I mean, obviously, you can tell I really have a lot of admiration for this woman. I despise this woman to this day. That's why I did run for governor, to try to dethrone her. Unfortunately, we were unsuccessful, but she was still ruling unilaterally. And I never in a million years thought that a governor could weaponize the health department. And you know how they did it? They start going after professional licenses.
Yep.
Liquor licenses. If you're a doctor, they went and investigated me because I refused to wear the mask. And somebody told on me, like, that doctor's not wearing a mask and his patients aren't wearing a mask. And I won that. And so all those things, they start holding over our head, the overreach of government, what they do with licenses, right? And that's how they started to rule. And it happened to our kids, obviously. They kept our kids at home through supposedly cold and flu season, which that doesn't exist. It's too much toxic sugar and inflammation season. That's a whole other different podcast for you.
Right.
To talk about. But she just continued her ruling, man, and she canceled our athletics, and she put these kids at home for online learning and just set back the education. I mean, Michigan is not last, but it's creeping to the bottom of the education. Our kids aren't reading. Our math is out of control. I mean, it's bad. It really is bad here.
No thanks to the communist agendas that have been successful because of governors just like her. So we're going to have to pick that right back up after we come back from the break. I want to remind everybody that we are heralding out of AmericaOutloud.news. So be sure to check out AmericaOutloud.shop, where there are some amazing natural products there, and you cannot get them at the discount rate that you can on America Out Loud just by using the coupon code OUTLOUD. We have a product called Chemical Free Body, that if you're looking to detox your body naturally, there is a wonderful gut detox that I want you to check out. But we're going to be right back, so stay with us. We'll be back in just a moment. So because we are streaming live, we can continue talking anyways in spite of that, but that's for the radio show that's going to be coming out as well. But I do want to welcome everybody back to Nurses Out Loud. And again, I'm Nurse Michele, your host, and I'm here with Dr. Garrett Soldano. And he told us on the first half about his journey through the pandemic, what went down, how he faced a tyrannical governor, Gretchen Whitmer, and the kind of insanity that we all know happened all over the country. But there were certain states, and Michigan was one of them, that had tyrannical governors that made it like a communist state. And he is a person who ended up running for governor. We're going to hear a little bit of detail about that. But he got so, stirred up in what needed to be done. He followed the calling that he felt a burden to do, started this huge group, and found so many masses, hundreds of thousands of American citizens who were going to have nothing to do with this insanity. So thanks to the American people who said, heck no, they aligned with each other. Changes happen. And right before we spoke earlier, he was referencing a 1945 law that she was weaponizing, and they successfully got that to be overturned. And we are very thankful that happened, because the future for his children and his children's children have been amazingly impacted because he made that choice to go after that. And his son and him were out hunting in the forest when that news came. So I'm really happy for that wonderful father-son moment, because even though he may not have gotten to get his first deer that day, he can always say why he didn't get it that day. I just think it's an amazing story. I love it. I want to remind everybody that everything about Garrett and any citations that we reference regarding him will be in my show notes on americaoutloud.news/nursesoutloud. But also those who are watching live, you can see the grassrootsarmy.com is where you can find more information about Garrett, because these are the stories of the people that we want to make sure get out to the people. Because you may want to say, I want to move on from COVID. For goodness sakes, Michele, COVID is a thing of the past. No, it is not. If we do not keep these stories alive and make sure that the American people know what the American people had to do, I'm sure he lost wages. Many of you lost wages, lost your careers. Many of you, we're going to address the mandates that happened also right after the passage of the 1945 law came to an end in October of 2020 for Michiganders. But 2 months later, we had a vaccine mandate roll out. And I'm sure Dr. Gretchen Whitmer Governor Gretchen Whitmer had a thing or two to say about that against the people. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that for a moment, Garrett, before we talk about what's going on here today?
Oh man, like where do I even begin with that? Immediately when they started to talk about the vaccine, I was out on my soapbox and saying, hey, there is no long-term safety and efficacy studies on this. I've been very outspoken against vaccines because mainly I'm a chiropractor and I used to do talks and stuff on it for almost 20 years. And so I definitely had the belief system built. I've done the research. A lot of that research is very hard to find now. It's mysteriously disappearing, and they're censoring doctors who are speaking out against it. But right off the bat, I knew like this is the end game here. Is they want to freaking get this vaccine out, and they're going to say that it's going to cure everything, which we were lied to. Even President Biden, Gretchen Whitmer, everyone was saying like, hey, just get this, and you're not going to get it. We can end the lockdowns, folks. We can end the pandemic. We can do it for you. You're not vaccinating for yourself. You're vaccinating for little Billy down the street. You're vaccinating for the Walmart greeter. And they just fed all this garbage. And I was like, do not take it. Do not take it. And here we are seeing more and more of the catastrophic consequences in long-lasting, unfortunately, deadly consequences that we're seeing with this thing. And guess what? No liability, right?
Right.
All because the 1985 Child Vaccine Information Act, is that what it's called?
1986 National Childhood Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. And I personally am a person who's had a child in that program for 8 years. It takes 10 years to lose, and there's basically no justice in the system. So you have to have a doctor brave enough to write a mechanism of injury paper to the court to prove that case.
What you just said, having a doctor brave enough. And you're exactly right. Even in Kalamazoo, Michigan is where my clinic is. And there are still doctors, medical doctors and hospitals and pediatricians who will kick children and their families out for questioning or not following the CDC guidelines, which is insane. As doctor, that's what doctor means. It means to teach, to provide information. Your job is to give information to the patient. Hey, when somebody comes into my chiropractic clinic, I sit them down. I say, hey, here's the positives of doing the adjustments. Here's the negatives of not doing the adjustment. And here are the possible side effects of the adjustment. It's called honoring your Hippocratic oath, correct?
Exactly.
And they're bypassing that. And it's hot garbage, as I say. And I tell all the people around here, if you want to go to anyone, I will not kick you out of my clinic. If you decide not to vaccinate, I won't kick you out the clinic. If you do vaccinate, it's your choice as a parent. All I inspire my patients to do is do the research, question. You have every right. Sorry, I'm very passionate.
Oh, no, I'm so thankful. And I wonder if we were all finally find each other and be at a place and we could get us a poll on everybody who stood up as feisty fighters. Were we all a little bit fringe on our own already? So we may look like normal people walking around, but I happen to be a homeschooler for 31 years. So I'm not exactly your normal girl. And I have 6 kids, so I have a little bit larger family than your average person. You're a chiropractor. They're looked at as a kind of different kind of medical specialty. So we're fringe people who are used to going up against the tide. But what a lot of people may not know, and you want to check out on nursesoutloud.com, where we have all of our articles, is I had a recent interview with a Dr. AJ Morris, who is a Navy JAG, who is exposing the Rockefeller agenda against the medical community that existed prior to the MD movement. And that it was actually doctors of chiropractic and homeopathy that were the dominant treaters and therapeutic people who provided help and hope to the sick and dying and suffering and birthing of this world. They were the dominant. Nurses went into this profession to be relievers of suffering, doctors as well. But the Rockefeller movement that came in and took over the pushed it aside and made it fringe. But it is people like you that have been out there healing successfully for generations, long before we had the MD or the expert that we now, if anybody even says trust the experts now, it's like the biggest joke, because literally what we learned is that the experts apparently have been bought and paid for by the Rockefeller agenda as well, that is big pharma. So on this particular show called Vaccine Double Cross, he does expose, you mentioned early on the first show, the Spanish flu. And a lot of people don't realize this. It's really referenced quite a bit. But the Spanish flu, he contends, Dr. A.J. Morris contends, and there is proof to show that it's true, that it was only the people on the Allied side who received the Rockefeller-invented vaccine that was sent over to this war. They are the ones who died. They are the ones who had this disease. There were no Axis powers who got this supposedly contagious disease. It was those who were injected with the poison created by the Rockefellers, and they brought it back home to the people. And when you do a deep dive in this, it's going to blow your mind. So it's really everything that we've ever been told about vaccines has been a narrative. And as a person who's a nurse, you're kind of and you're a physician, you've been led to believe that vaccines are this, end all to save the world. How did we ever survive on the planet before vaccines were created? And, Gretchen Whitmer could play to that, because that propaganda existed my entire life. So as y'all were facing that agenda that was coming out on you, how did the vaccine mandate impact Michigan for you?
Oh, well, people are losing their jobs, right? And our military and the hospitals and everything else. And now there's been lawsuits that have been filed and people are actually starting to win those. But unfortunately, it takes years for that to happen. And what are you supposed to do during that time? Like you have to try to provide for your family. So these people were painted into a corner. Either I put food on the table. Yeah, I may not agree with this, but I have to do it because I have to do it for my family. And that's just flat out wrong. Okay. And I can go on and on about the vaccine stuff. I mean, everything you hit is, and that's what's going on right now, is people are starting to be awakened. And sorry, I went off camera on you. I was going to my X account to look at a CNN video that I posted the other day from Dr. Ben Tapper, another chiropractor who stood up, and they had the statistics of who's vaccinating their children from 2001 now to 2024, and how important that is to people. Back in 2001, the majority of society, which we lived through this, you and I know this, was 94% of the people. They said, yeah, you must vaccinate. In 2019, it dropped a little bit. People like yourself been fighting with the vaccine movement, educating people, so it dropped to 84%. Now in 2024, it's 69%, which is great news.
Yeah.
For those of us like yourself who's been fighting for decades against this, just to educate and keep this little thing called medical freedom. And that's what I tell people. Like, I don't care if you vaccinate your kid. And if you believe in vaccinations, why in the hell do you care if I don't vaccinate my kids? Because your vaccine's supposed to protect you, right?
If your vaccine is working, you should be fine.
Absolutely. And what people don't understand, it's chiropractors a lot. If you're a philosophical chiropractor, not a lot has changed in our profession ever since we were founded back in 1895. We had a philosophy saying what causes dis-ease of the body are thoughts, traumas, and toxins. mental aspect, as we are well aware of. You got to have a positive mental outlook. If not, causes stress on your body, which creates free radicals, which creates inflammation, right? And then we got the traumas. You fall down, you hurt yourself, and then we got toxins. Holy cow. Nutrition, GMO. And people tend to think, what is the number up to? I don't even know. Is it 68, 76 by the age of 18 with these vaccines that the CDC now recommends?
It's actually over 100 now. So I tell people, my grandmother is 97. My mom is 77. I am 57. I have a daughter, 27, and a grandson, 7. How many vaccines did my grandmother have to have before she was 18? 1. My mother, 2. Me, 4. My kids, 14. What do you think my grandchildren are facing right now? And I always wait for them to answer, and they always double the 14 and usually make it 28. I blow their mind and tell them it was 72, but that was before they added the COVID-19 vaccine. It is now over 92 or more because of the RSV vaccine as well. So before your babies and grandbabies are 18 years old, you think that they're getting the same vaccines you got when you were a kid. You think you're being a great mother, but when they get those little 3 shots, 1 in an arm and a leg, when they're 2 months old, they're actually getting 8 toxins that day. And you just think they're getting 3 shots. So we do need the American public waking up to what is really happening, because it is a money-making industry. While the health of the children decline, money is increasing for pharma.
100%. And like you and I are similar in age. Back when we when we were growing up, you heard about the kid maybe in the town over that had a peanut allergy. And holy cow, there was an urban legend that there's actually a kid out there allergic to ice cream. His life has ended, right? That was all you heard. Now you fast forward today, and I've seen it in my clinic just being in practice for over 17 years from when I started to now. My patients, especially the kids, they're sicker. Autoimmune disorders, allergies, asthma, anxiety, depression, all these other things that are going on. I'm like, what the hell is going on? They're just getting overloaded with toxicity.
I know.
And it's insane. And that's why I was so grateful that Robert Kennedy now is on the team of the Trump team to actually start bringing some common sense and just question. Let's have a conversation. Let's get people in the room. And that's why I'm for Robert Kennedy. I'm for the Maha movement. I'm so excited for that, because people need to know. And unfortunately, just like you said, when people find out, I watch my patients go through a variety of different emotions. There's guilt, there's frustration, there's anger, right? There's denial. Say that they wouldn't do that. And that's one thing that we have to continue to do, is not use force. That's what the other side does. Force will lose eventually, just like Gandhi, right? We have to use power. We use power by information, by inspiration, by education, right? By freedom.
Right.
That's how we continue to get that number to drop from 69%. Hopefully get that even lower, under 50% would be fantastic. Okay. And I have a short story, if you don't mind me sharing. My wife, our first son that we had in the hospital. Well, I didn't have him. My wife did. All right. I was there as a cheerleader. We all know men's role in this.
Yes.
And we had our first son in the hospital. Our second son was delivered at home by me in a hot tub, or in a tub, excuse me. But when we had our baby in the hospital, obviously that's when all the pressure came, right? After my son was born, like, hey, vaccination, blah, 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 blah. And I remember standing up to the pediatrician and I said, no, we're not going to do any of the vaccines. And she's like, why? I was like, number one, let's talk about the hepatitis B vaccine. If my kid's not sharing dirty needles or having unprotected sex, why the hell would I want to even vaccinate my kid with the hepatitis B, when if I wanted to do it, why not wait till he's 12, 13, and 14 and maybe start doing it then, instead of injecting all this garbage and aluminum into my children? And she looked at me. She's like, well, that's not true. There's no side effects to vaccines. And I looked at her. I said, excuse me, let's go to the other room. And I sat her down and educated her a little bit. And she left the room crying because I was upset, because it's against her Hippocratic oath. You're not allowed to do that as a doctor. You're supposed to explain to the patient. And she came back as we were walking out. They didn't even wheelchair us out of the hospital. They made us walk out. That's how mad they were at us, right? And she caught me, grabbed my arm. She's like, you're right. I Googled it. There are side effects to vaccines. And I looked at her. I said, you Googled it? And I said, my God, right? And I left like I knew. I had a belief system. I researched. I'm like, every single parent is just being hook, line, and sinker to big pharma, right? Because I worked in the pharmaceutical industry. I worked in the animal research facilities where we tested vaccines and drugs and everything on these animals. And I seen firsthand how they get pushed through. I seen that you would think The animal that best represents our physiology would be monkeys, right? But they're too expensive and they fight back, right? And they're very strong. Pigs with organs. But the animal that they use the most, rats, mice, beagle dogs. People don't know that.
Yeah.
Thousands upon thousands, like the Holocaust of animals. We never see PETA really fight against that. Well, sometimes they do. But
that's a mission we should all start, is stir up PETA.
yeah, I mean, it's insane what people don't know, and they keep it all behind closed doors. And that's why, like, now you got me off on a tangent, Nurse Michele.
Well, it's very important that we do have these tangents, because people don't realize that your physicians did not get but a very little bit of teaching, just like your nurses. We nurses who know that all we got taught was, here's the vaccine schedule. This is going to boost your immunity. Make sure your patients comply. If it were not for vaccines, all of us would be dead, and make sure all the kids get them. And parents who think they're being really good parents have read more about the car seat they purchased than anything inside that needle being injected into their children. And yes, that does make you feel guilty as a parent. Many of us are guilty of being that ignorant, and it's time for the ignorance to stop. It is a pharmaceutical product. There is not a pharmaceutical product on the market that does not have risk associated to it. So that for a physician to even think that a vaccine is incapable would be like saying, and you know what immune globulin is? I mean, that's not a drug, but it's an immune agent. You can die from an immune globulin infusion with an allergic reaction. So there are all kinds of severe things that can happen to anybody when something foreign is taken into you. You could die from too much water. So obviously it's worth it to know a little bit more, be informed. We're going to make sure that there's always citations on Nurses Out Loud, that you can get better educated. We want you better educated, and then you'll make a more informed decision. And that's what it sounds like Dr. Soldano is dedicated to doing as well. And I don't want to miss anything that you did do, though, that happened in Michigan, because one thing your governor did do is break federal Title VII law. And people don't realize this. There's, I think, 5 governors who specifically did this, that if you owned a business and you were daring to give a religious accommodation to a person who got the vaccine, you could lose your business license. And governors like this took away the business license of people who were giving a constitutional right to an employee. And people may not realize also, 75% of the US population got 2 of these vaccines. So it was that successful. But thank goodness only 11% came back for any more. And there's another statistic out there that shows that apparently 70 to 80% of Americans know somebody who was harmed by this COVID-19 vaccine. So that looks like a correlation, causation, kind of like I know somebody who got hurt, or I personally have been hurt. And you and I are dealing with the hurt and wounded and severe. You know, we know about people who have died suddenly, who have dropped dead, who've had bizarre illnesses, who've been handicapped, who can't speak, walk, talk anymore, who can't function anymore, who are, waiting for justice in court and not getting justice, can't get their jobs back, that mandated they get those vaccines. They're trying to fight for justice, can barely get even wages to support themselves. This is what's happening all across this country. And that's why stories like this cannot stop happening, because it will happen again, and it may be you the next time.
And that's what they evolved that conversation. Remember how they continue to switch the narrative with the vaccine, the COVID vaccine specifically, is like, hey, it's going to prevent you from getting it. You won't spread it. Then everybody was getting it. They were spreading it. Then they transferred it, and they evolved the narrative to say, well, it's going to help the people who are immunocompromised. Well, that failed, right? And then it evolved into, well, it's going to keep you out of the hospital, right? What it sounded like to me was it was a therapeutic, right?
Yeah.
Well, why didn't they call it a therapeutic? Because their asses would have been held liable from all the damage that it's creating. So they said vaccine. I have the screenshot of the actual CDC changing the definition of vaccine. Did you know that they did that?
Oh yeah, we tried to expose it, and it was censored.
Oh yeah,
proving the citation of, here is the original definition. This is the new definition. Please pay attention. They're doing this so that they can pass this without liability.
It's insane what they're willing to do and how they can get away with it. And God bless people like you. And I want to make sure that I'm going to be highlighting your website for that information, because people are starving for this information. So I really, really appreciate what you guys are all doing, because it matters. It truly does. But just to make it simple, folks, look, God blessed us with an unbelievable, this body, right? And if you look at my big old hairy face, right? There's hair in all of our orifices to keep stuff out. We have a digestive system to keep stuff out and filter things, and kidneys and everything else. We have the biggest organ of our body. It's called your skin, to keep bad stuff out. It's all naturally been built. And what do we do when we vaccinate? We bypass all of these natural mechanisms and we inject right into our bloodstream a foreign man-made object. And sometimes, as you are well aware of, it's aborted fetal tissue, all this other crazy stuff that they put in it, and it goes right into our bloodstream, bypassing the blood-brain barrier, and the list goes on and on and on. And so you just keep it simple and you get back to the basics: positive mental aspect, move, nutrition, moderation. You live a happy, healthy lifestyle. It's that easy.
Yeah. And what people don't realize also is that we are still facing people across this country right now because of the bird flu, and Nurses Out Loud is covering everything about bird flu and whatever else they're trying to release on us, because there is definitely something being released on the people right now. So you need to know about healthy options to be able to confront these things that they are doing. I mean, everybody doesn't have a great terrain, so you need to know how to protect your terrain if you've got a puny terrain from past toxins. And one of the things is we teach people about nasopharyngeal sanitation and what they can do in their nasal oral pharynx, which is where the pathogens tend to replicate and worsen, and you can do something about it there. So we are trying to address that this is really going on. And others out there are already being asked to wear masks. So we've got citations easily available on brownstone.org that has 170 mass studies showing the ineffectiveness of harms. We help you know how to write something that says, this letter serves to notify you that I am invoking my right to religious accommodation under Title VII of the U.S. Civil Rights Act. You cannot cease me from being able to breathe effectively by forcing me to wear a mask. You cannot force me to take a medical product against my conscientious objection. I am an American citizen, and anywhere in this country where we are still facing mandators like Gretchen Whitmer, we've got to do what it takes to take down the laws that have been allowing these kind of people to practice and do what they're doing, because they are anti-constitution to do that. Now, before we get off today, I want to make sure to let everybody know it's happening right now. Okay. And we have a quick little video just to remind you of what is actually going down right now and how they are already propagandizing and setting us up for probably a January 2020 perfectly timed incident that's going to make us all afraid and think they're going to lock us down again. So check this out and tell me what you think about this in the comments. Unbelievable. This is unbelievable.
The last one was the guy who's going to fall in the streets. And I mean, when that got pushed out in February of 2020, I mean, it literally, we witnessed firsthand, we experienced it. It scared the hell out of humanity. And I like to question everyone, especially in the United States. How many people did you see dead in the grocery aisle from COVID are falling in the streets? Right? But hey, you know what? Why don't they start sharing the video on corporate media? Right? Of all the people suddenly collapsing from what's going on in our society right now, right?
Yes, exactly.
It's so insane. I mean, all you can do is laugh at it for the people who are awakened and been awakened with this stuff, and you just kind of laugh. But like you said before, there's still people that fall hook, line, and sinker for this garbage.
Yes. And I want you to know that in just a moment, if you have any questions, you can put them in the comment section and we'll try to answer some of your questions, or at least bring out to attention some of the comments that you're making in the comment section. So we'll do that in just a moment. But before we have to part for America Out Loud News, I want to make sure you get to say what you would like to say to the American people from what your lessons learned in this last 4 years, and what you would say to them to pass on to their kids. What is some important messages you feel like are imperative that you learned the hard way on the cuff when you had to do it? You didn't mean to become a politician. You didn't mean to have to go and run for governor. And I think you came in third place as you ran. So a lot happened for you. So what would you give to the people to say how to make sure this never happens again?
Number one, I'll never be a politician, by the way. I'm just a normal average American like all of you. And don't ever think that you can't make a difference, because you can. The power of one can lead to the power of many. You literally just have to have the courage to stand up. And I know it's scary. I know you're going to get attacked, but there's bigger things going on right now. So we need great people to do extraordinary things. We need ordinary people to do extraordinary things, because there's strength in numbers. And for anything that they try to pull here in the near future, it's not going to work as well as it did the first time. There will be such a huge pushback. Unfortunately, a lot of people have lost faith in the healthcare industry, which is unfortunate, because there's a lot of people that need preventative care, they need checkups and everything else. And they've lost a lot of people, and they're going to have to build back that trust. And so if you're a medical professional, if you're in the healthcare industry and you might have bought into this stuff, I urge you to start standing up and do what's right, and start doing what's right for your patients and informing them. And don't be afraid. And if you lose your job, go find it somewhere else, because there's been a lot of people that has went down a different path that they never thought was possible. And we always say, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. And he continues to laugh at me all the time. And if you have that feeling that you want to serve in whatever way possible, just look at yourself in the mirror and run for that type of office. Don't feel that you have to run for president or governor. Start small. Start in your local school boards. Holy cow, if you really want to make a difference, do it locally. Your city commissions. These school boards need good parents to stand up. I mean, we're looking at what's going on right now, and I know, Nurse Michele, that you're familiar with what's going on with the alphabet mafia and the indoctrination that's happened with the kids. I continue to call out the school boards across the nation. We have a really bad one here in Michigan, the Rochester school boards that continue to do all this garbage, taking away parental rights, basically indoctrinating these kids behind the parents' back, and it's wrong. And you should never, ever give away your rights as a parent. And you need to realize and understand that the government doesn't own your kids. They're your kids.
Well, I'm so thankful you came on to Nurses Out Loud to tell your story today. I love the strength with which you speak. The words linger, words are powerful, and we're so thankful for that. And I want everybody listening to remember that we are in a war for truth. And the truth is, if not for brave Americans willing to step up and confront tyrannical mandates, where would we be today with the progress that has already been made? So we got to make sure things like this don't happen again in Michigan or anywhere else in the U.S. or the world. So anywhere you're listening, Nurses Out Loud appreciates you today. And we appreciate you sharing this content, because it's a simple thing to share a podcast link. And when you do something like that, you are changing somebody else's life by just influencing them with another piece of information that does empower them. So thanks for being with us on Nurses Out Loud today. But for those of you that have any questions in the Q&A area, I want to give y'all a chance to, we'll see what you had and see what kind of comments are out there. Somebody says that they love their chiropractor. I suspect that is you they're talking about, Garrett. That would be Sally making that comment. And then Heidi is saying, are any hospitals being sued for locking unvaccinated in COVID wards yet? We want to join in. Okay, that is wonderful inquiry. Okay, so there has been something called the COVID Litigation Summit, and I've been to 2 of them. There have been 3 since COVID. And the first one happened right here in Atlanta, Georgia. And let me tell you what, there are about 500 lawyers from around the country, a couple from around the world that showed up there. Being that y'all border Canada, I'll tell you this, there was some lawyers that had to be smuggled across the Canadian border into America to attend this conference, because they couldn't legally come into our country or enter back because they weren't vaccinated. So that's a real thing. And in that conference, you want to look up COVID Litigation Conference. It was hosted by Steve Kirsch, and he has a program, if I'm not mistaken, Tim, I'm going to ask you to look it up for me. Steve Kirsch's program, it's something about national vaccine injuries. He's trying to make it aware. He was a man who did get the vaccine, he and his wife and kids, and they all were injured. So he is on a mission to expose what's going on. So he financed this, and I felt like I was at the second constitutional convention. That's what it felt like. We are talking about powerful legal people who see exactly what went down constitutionally wrong, and they mean to do business. They mean to get justice. And sadly, it is not the people who submitted to the mandate that are now injured that are getting the justice they should have. It is the people who said no and were fired. It is the people who stood up, like yourself, Garrett, who took the hits, who got harmed. Those are cases that are winning in the millions all over the country because they had a constitutional right under Title VII to not be forced against, let's say, their religious conscientious objection to not submit to a vaccine mandate. They lost their jobs, they lost their houses, they lost their ability to provide for their families, where other people, let's say single moms, because single mothers are apparently the largest populator of the healthcare profession. So most hospitals are employing single mothers. So if you're a single mom and you're a one-income family and they're telling you you're not going to have a paycheck unless you take that vaccine, sadly, a lot of those women, not all women, but a lot of nurses got that vaccine against their conscience. And a lot of them are dead now. And a lot of them are handicapped now. And we're trying to get justice for them. And they are not getting it. They're even having insurances refuse to care for them because it was an EUA product. They willingly submitted to an emergency use product that wasn't proven. So we tried to get that word out to people saying, this is not an approved drug. You are in a trial if you do this. Don't do it. That was censored. And blood is on the hands of the censors. What do y'all have to say about that? What do you have to say, Garrett?
I 100% agree with you. And it's funny how Zuckerberg, he's allowing a little bit more of free speech now since that President Trump is in. And now that he's bringing Dana White on the executive board, I mean, I've been deplatformed more times than I can count, 10 times on Facebook. I had a huge YouTube channel, over 250,000 people that was deplatformed for exposing the southern border. Commie TikTok is horrible. I've been deplatformed 3 times on there with hundreds of thousands of followers. But I'm like that guy. I won't give up. I continue to grow my platforms. I continue to go out there and speak the truth. I'm just that damn stubborn. But again, for everyone out there, do right. Just do what's right and support those folks and support people like Nurse Michele and others who are putting themselves out there, because when you're out there on social media kind of leading the charge, you're blazing a trail and you take a lot of flack for that and a lot of heat and a lot of hate, and evil comes at you, but evil wins when good people do nothing.
Well, I want to remind everybody, there is only one power in this world, is God. Everything else is trying to be a power. It's just trying. It's just action verbing. But I mean, there is one power only, and we definitely associate ourselves with that power here at Nurses Out Loud. And nursesoutloud.com, it's running on the ticker tape right now. That's where you're going to find anything that we teach on. We are telling you about the black labels that are put on things like Tamiflu. I just had a son who ended up with a bad flu, and a doctor tried to give a 17-year-old Tamiflu that is black box labeled for kids with severe neurological damage. If you can have such severe issues that are lifelong brain damage from Tamiflu, and it's documented on the package, and this doctor doesn't even know that. So we are exposing the black labels that have to do with drugs that your doctors are just writing a prescription for you because they're getting financial incentives, I'm afraid to tell you, for those medications. So do not get outside of the white coat worship model, where just because somebody's a white coat, they must know everything when it comes to your health. It is not true. You have access to the world's most large research tool called Google. And the doctors may say that their medical degrees trump Google. But here's the deal. We can actually, love motivates a lot. So if it's your person that you're caring about trying to solve a problem for them medically, and you're doing deep dive research, there's a good chance you're more informed than your doctor about something. Obviously, when you get to your specialist, you'll be talking to somebody who can talk your language. But you may be just talking to your GP that has not done a deep dive in your rare condition. So do your deep dives. We encourage you to do that. I want to make a comment that somebody named Jeffrey said, tenacious G-Dog. So they're obviously very proud of you. So that's encouraging to hear. And then Julie says, I never believed one thing about the whole pandemic. So Julie, it sounds like you were awake, and we're thankful for people like yourself. And We don't really, I've polled a lot of people who said they were awake. And one of the things I've consistently find, I'm not sure if you found this to be true too, Garrett, but one thing that's been consistent is they've had some kind of suffering or bad medical thing happen to themselves or their loved one in the past that made them discover the hard way that the medical system was broken and that it didn't have the answers they needed. And they found doctors like Dr. Soldano in fringe medicine that we know as chiropractic, which we is not correct to call it fringe. It is correct to call it first, original.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's how a lot of people learn is you got to kind of hit rock bottom of having something catastrophic happen to you. And I try not to allow people to get there. And to all the moms out there, follow your intuition. You got that for a reason. And if your mother's intuition is something's off, something's unsettling, you have to listen to that. And don't be bullied that you have to feel that you have to follow through with what your medical doctor or anyone else, even me, I tell my patients like, hey, just because I say it or you see me online, question me. We can have a conversation. And I always tell my patients, if I don't know the answer, I'm going to go look it up and I'm going to find out something for you, at least have a conversation with you. And that's what good doctoring should be.
Yeah, I love it. Lisa says, New York did a lot of this to me and my kids, and we escaped to Florida in 2023. And for those who do not know this, there was a mass exodus of many of these states and they came to places like Georgia. And once upon a time, Georgia was an affordable housing area. And in 2021, actually, that's when the great housing shift happened all over the country. And in 2021, I made an insane profit on my house that I personally couldn't afford to purchase again because it was so high priced. So yeah, I got a lot of profit, but because I was going to go buy another house immediately, the next house, smaller size, more money. And it's only been 2 years since then. That house has already increased in value 200,000 more in 2 years. So the level of insanity that has happened because of this pandemic has reduced the affordability of housing. I have all of my kids are adults except for my 17-year-old who is 6'3". So, I mean, my point is that all of these adult kids of ours, to be able to purchase a home, the idea of home ownership is disappearing. We've got to change the politicians get rid of them. We can't let this happen.
Nurse Michele, you're spot on. And here's what I want to say to your audience and mine that is watching and listening to is people tend to think that since President Trump is won, that everything's going to be great. You have to understand, we have decades, not 4 years, we have decades of work to undo that's everything that's been done to this country. We are so in debt. The housing, the stock market, I feel that it's going to have a really big reset or a crash. I mean, things are out of control. And that is why you have to stay inspired. You have to stay motivated, but most importantly, you have to stay activated. You have to get involved at the local level, at the state rep level, get good people in. In the state of Michigan, hey, President Trump won state of Michigan this time, but in 2026, we have to win back our Senate in the state of Michigan. We got to get back the governor's mansion, the attorney general, the secretary of state. The list goes on and on. If you don't do anything, it's going to happen again.
Yeah, and it's going to be simple like sharing content. The new media exists. There are little links. All you have to do is just go copy paste your favorite podcast that you think just blew you away, whatever you think is so good. Drop it in a text to several of your friends. If you don't overdo that, they'll listen and you will be able to affect change in your community by just opening them up. You have no idea what areas of ignorance exist in your community, and be open to talking to people who don't look like you and assume that there's something that they need to hear about as well, because we saw during this pandemic, they used every weapon they possibly could, and dividing people on racial lines and class lines was definitely one of the weapons they attempted to use against us. And we have got to align on everything.
Remember, it was, I just laughed because the insanity, but remember the Floyd protest. You weren't supposed to be outside until the protest happened. Then they said it was healthy to protest.
Yeah.
Like folks like us were doing freedom festivals and we were the enemy. So it goes on and on and on. It's insane what people have done and what they continue to try to do. But you have to stay involved. You really do. If you don't,
if you're listening, you're one of the people who says, I really hate to admit that I was one of those people that was part of the problem or being a problem. It is time to come clean of your situation and just get it out there that, I wish I had not responded the way I did. I wish I had responded differently. I'll never do it again. Or, start being repentant with the people that, you really did try to criminalize, because honestly, it's fair to say you were part of the problem. And we want you to think more. We want you to use that great mind that you've been given and trust that, you do have the ability to research. And yes, and remember, you're always going to find science that says exactly what you want it to. Just like if you go in a courtroom, if Garrett and I were in a car wreck together, I would have my lawyers with all the proof and all the science about why his neck really isn't broken. And he would have all the science for why that injury really did happen. There's always going to be experts on either side of the table with both arguments. That's why you're mind, body, soul, and spirit. You have a conscience that has an ability to communicate outside of your thinking brain. Listen to your conscience and then research accordingly, because maybe that particular thing is dangerous for you. And obviously, if the vaccine was going to kill everybody, we'd have 75% of dead people. And we won't go into that fully today, but we already know that people who've looked inside the bottles of these vaccines, there was not consistency inside those vials. There were vials that looked like they had saline. There were vials that looked like they had extreme heavy toxic metals. So, people are going to have to do litigation and investigation into that. But obviously, if there's nefarious powers at play and you want to go as far as you can conspiratorially speaking, if somebody's really trying to take out a lot of people, let's just say that was a real thing. Michele contends it is, that if it really was, of course you wouldn't have 100% drop at the same time, right?
You also have to remember, folks, look how resilient your bodies are. Look how, with all the toxicity that we're exposed to, you're still kicking right now. Those of you who are watching and listening, you're still alive. Your body can process and get rid of a lot of stuff. Okay. But so I don't want to be on here fear mongering and everything else and gloom and doom. Your body's amazing. And what I see in my clinic is just like Nurse Michele said, you're never going to get 100% sure on your decision. You're not going to be like, well, if I do the research that I go on Nurse Michele's website, I'm going to feel 100% that I'm right. You're not going to get there. But everything that she just said is spot on. It's going to bring you to at least a point of neutrality where then you're going to bring all the other information, your heart, your soul, your mind, your body, your knowledge, and then conversations. And then you can make an empowered, educated decision to move forward.
Right.
And that's what my goal is for everyone out there, is to be able to do. Just don't follow blindly.
Yeah, make an informed decision and find people that are trusted sources. If your doctor is still pushing you to get the COVID-19 vaccine, 100% that doctor is behind on reading the data that's being published right now. There should not be any more promotion of the COVID-19 vaccine going on because of the harms that we already know are happening. So if your doctor starts saying that to grandma or mama and you're at one of the visits, you can ask that doctor, could I see your vaccine card and see if you're up to date on the 9th vaccine that you're supposed to be on, if you are, because it's so ineffective.
And think about that. It's on the CDC schedule. They're recommending it to kids and babies. And the kids and babies weren't the ones dying. It was the immunocompromised with 2 or 3 underlying medical conditions. We all had, a 99.9% survival rate if infected. And they want to give it to kids because Dr. Ben Tapper, who, if you don't follow him on X, I strongly encourage you to. He's a great guy. But I think if you make the CDC schedule, Nurse Michele, what is it, the amount of money that company makes? It's something it's like $20 million or something. It's an astronomical big number. If they make that list, then they cha-ching, cha-ching, ching all day long.
Yeah, and Dr. Tapper has been a guest on Nurses Out Loud and America Out Loud multiple times. And if you don't know Dr. Peter McCullough, he picked each of the nurses that are on the show. And he was a guest on the show last week about some of the flu stuff that's going on. And almost every doctor you've probably read about that's putting out amazing stuff, they are on this network. And we are in the top 1% in the world as Nurses Out Loud. Our show is quite popular because apparently the people want to hear the stories of the people and they want to hear the truth. Somebody made a comment. Let me see what you have to say about this. Why is it always starting in China, Dr. Soldano?
Oh man, we're going into global politics now, aren't we? That's a whole different show of the rabbit hole that we could go on down there. So
Okay.
yeah, I mean, it's all about money, folks. If you just got to keep following the money, and then the answers will reveal itself, unfortunately. We have some power players in the world that want to have control over all of you. That's why they're trying to take down this little idea called America. We're the last free country. If you truly look at it, we are literally there's nowhere else to go in this world for freedom. And so that's why it's so important that you fight. It's so important that we support the Second Amendment, because the Second Amendment, it's not for hunting. It's for protection of what? The First Amendment. And if we lose the First Amendment, which we all experience censorship and deplatform, then they control the narrative. And if you control the narrative, you control the truth. And so that's why we have to continue to stand up against this hot garbage.
Yeah, wonderful. And a lot of people made some wonderful comments. A lot of people are awake, probably because they know you, and they are aware that healthcare is sick care right now, and that there is a need for the system. There is parallel medical systems creating out there, and a lot of them have been there all along. Look for those functional medicine doctors. Look for those naturopathic physicians in your community, because that's probably where you're going to find the better sources for treating your situations without pharmaceuticals. So I encourage you all to do that. That was something said by Sally and Joseph. And when you say, Joseph, that we're in shambles, I would say that because all of us that are awake are making sure that's not true, I'm not going to contend that we're in shambles. I say that we're in a season of help and hope, and that the people are awake, and the time that where we were going, the era of the big pharma running things, their time is coming to an end, because too many people are woke up. They messed up. They played their hands wrong in 2020. And like you said, the reduction in the amount of people now questioning vaccines, they should be questioning and make decisions intelligently and wisely. It makes absolutely no sense to get a hepatitis B to a brand new baby right out of the womb on the first day of life. And he went over that earlier today as well. It says they changed our hospitals. Kathy said in Michigan during COVID, brought foreign doctors into Michigan. Yes. And the question is we need investigative journalists. We need investigative citizens. Actually, you can reach out to James O'Keefe, and I'm trying to think of the name of his organization. It just escaped me. Veritas. I think Project Veritas. Yep. If you want to go undercover and get spy gear and everything and get inside your career, that you know things, if you witness something, not only do we want to hear about it on Nurses Out Loud, you can be a whistleblower. We have a federal whistleblower nurse that's on every Monday, and she is about to be ruled on. And when that ruling happens, she had hidden cameras in the hospital incriminating the people who knew they were doing wrong and doing it anyways to patients. They didn't use their thinking brains, and it's on camera, and they're going to go down for it. So if you want to be a person who asks questions and get out there, do not think that the mission is over. There is plenty of missions still available for each of you. And some of you were just cut out for this. So we encourage you to use that tenacious personality that you have and do the hard work, get the evidence, and let people like James O'Keefe help you get that evidence, and it'll get exposed, and you can protect your next generation from this happening again. Do you have a comment on that?
And just to hit on how powerful the people are. And so many times people are like, well, I'm just one person. Look, if you look at my story, if you take anything from this hour conversation, I think we're over an hour. Look, this all started with a 5-minute hissy fit video that I did online, which grew into a movement of hundreds of thousands of people in less than 4 weeks, that was able to take down and help take down the 1945 law, that continues to activate the people to inspire change in the state of Michigan, to get people to run for office, school boards, everything. You are that powerful. I can't stress that enough. You just have to merely muster the courage to claim it and stand up and do it. That's it. Yes. Please anchor that in.
Yes, and I forgot the new name of James O'Keefe's group is OMG. The acronym that's pretty popular that is associated to Oh My Gosh is actually called O'Keefe Media Group. So you can reach out to them, and you can do something to make a difference in your community and find out some private information and get it to them and help them. Our kids and babies need no vaccines. We haven't had those in America for decades. It's not needed. That's what Kathy has to say about it. And everybody, to each their own, to do your own research. The most important thing we want to make sure you understand is that your children are counting on you being an informed parent. I had a person that was on the show today who she was forced to have to get a vaccine to be able to attend her daughter's U.S. Air Force graduation. And she said to them she didn't want to do that. Well, they said, well, you had childhood vaccines, so you're not opposed to vaccines. And she tried to say something logical to them, and they did not logically accept her excuse. FYI, your parents made decisions for you for those childhood vaccines. Now that you're an adult, you can think for yourself and make different decisions. But your kids are counting on you to make well-informed medical decisions for them, because this is the only body they have. This is all they have. And they need you to protect them from as much of the toxins that are out there in this environment, because you want them to have a healthy body. You want them to have a healthy life. And that's what Dr. Soldano is all about. And that's what Nurses Out Loud is about too. Yes. Well, we'll end this, and you can give a final word. And we thank you so much for all you're doing. Thank you for your bravery.
Well, I really appreciate the time, and I could talk about this stuff all day, because it is amazing to see what people can do, especially when you have a group of people, we the people, as we say, when you can coordinate those folks and you can put them on a goal and a vision. And my goodness gracious, we can blaze trails so wide, so big, so full of hope and inspiration that everyone that doubted on us, hated on us, attacked us, guess what, folks? They're going to have to humbly follow. And that's what's happening right now. And we don't have to continue to point fingers at them and say, I told you so. You can just say, hey, look, we know you've been fooled once. You might have been fooled twice. Welcome to the movement. Let's move forward together. Let's have conversation, and let's restore what this country is about.
Love it. Thank you so much. We appreciate everybody. And check out nursesoutloud.com, and check out Dr. Soldano's thegrassrootsarmy.com as well. Thanks for being with us today.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for having me.
This show is brought to you by Nurses Out Loud. For more information, go to nursesoutloud.com.